Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we are going to talk about finals. But before we do that, Claire, tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. Ralph and I have been experimenting with vegetarian meals lately.
Oh.
Which has been a lot of fun. And we made this delicious jambalaya using tempeh instead of like shrimp or something. Which tempeh, I've eaten tempeh like as an undergrad in my dining hall, but I've never made it. Haven't had it recently. And Ralph sauteed it with some soy sauce, and it was great.
Oh,
and
nice.
Had a nice texture. So anyway, it was fun to experiment with.
Yeah, dude, like we kind of got out of the habit of it, but we would have like a couple of vegetarian days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, different. And then also possibly a little cheaper sometimes.
Totally,
And so,
totally.
that's cool. And it kind of makes you stretch yourself a bit to like come up
It
with
does.
new recipes.
You know, since we've been doing it, we've actually been thinking of more cool dinner ideas, like more than we have dinners. So it's been good. Yeah.
I kind of had a similar, like years ago, we had like a farm share thing.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you'd be like, what am I going to cook with this vegetable? So like it kind of made you like a bit more.
Yeah. Get out of a rut.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And boy,
Cool.
are we all in a rut right now. So it's like, yeah.
So how was your week?
My week was okay. I had to make a short, non-terrible, urgent, like not super terrible visit to the hospital. And it was really interesting because I have been feeling like students are really complaining at the moment.
Uh-huh.
And then seeing how people behave in the emergency room to doctors, I'm like, oh my God, my job is so easy. So it's definitely a good perspective check, for sure.
That's a really good point. Because, taking a test is stressful, but a different level of stress than being at the emergency room.
And I think people are obviously not their best selves when they're in the emergency room, but doctors and nurses, they were so lovely and so amazingly just kind and patient, and I don't know how they do what they do. I'm glad they do what they do, but they're amazing. Wonderful humans.
What a good reminder of how amazing they are.
And so somebody kind of whining about like homework is definitely not the worst thing that could happen. So
that's a great reminder.
Yes, so it was a good perspective check, for sure.
So I have a quote for us
today.
Oh,
Sweet, cool. Tell us your quote.
So this is from a book called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And he has 4 agreements that he talks about in the book. And they're all to help self-improvement. And they're really nice and encompassing. And the one that I've picked to share is be impeccable with your words. And a little more context is that's talking about saying exactly what you mean and really being sure that you mean what you say, and even inside your head. And I've really found, while thinking about this, that makes a huge difference to me to have, thinking the wrong thoughts goes down a wrong path, so it's really a good reminder.
That is speaking to me on so many levels. Like one thing I think is like whatever the opposite of your superpower is, I don't know, but is like I can be
Achilles
heel. Like I can be really glib, and I can be kind of just
exactly.
Chatting the chat and saying that, and I just really need to bring like a mindfulness sometimes to what I'm saying. And like even,
and it doesn't feel like a big deal. You're just chatting the chat, but it really does have an impact on yourself.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing is my critical self-talk is so extreme. Like if anybody talked to someone I cared about the way I talk to myself, like I would beat them up, and it's so, and it feels like it doesn't matter, and we kind of just casually say these things, like
totally.
And often with friends, the kind of almost competitive self-deprecating, like wait till you hear how I'm the worst. I'm the worst. And like it's just like really not what we need to be doing, but I do it all the time, and like it's, I don't know, I've heard that kind of even just expression of like words matter, and you're like yeah, but then when you actually think about it, you're like they do.
Yeah, and just listening to the voices in my own head is really illuminating.
Yes.
And being like, oh, I don't need to think that, actually. That's really not helpful now that I think about it, you know?
I mean, but that's kind of amazing to get to that point where you can even have that kind of level of self, like,
Totally,
yeah.
totally. I mean, well, another one of the agreements is do your best, because obviously you're not going to be able to just say, oh, now I'm impeccable with my words, problem solved, you know?
Right. And yeah, and all of these things is like a work in progress and not a
Exactly.
switch that
Infinitive.
you, yeah.
Yeah.
That is a cool quote.
Yeah, I've been liking it, kicking around in my head recently.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. And I feel like I'm sort of interacting with that in such a different way now because my words with the students are really limited. Like normally I would see them so often
Mm.
and chat and have so many other ways to build trust and do things and but like when most of my interaction is these random emails, like I need to be thoughtful in how I word those.
That's a good point. Totally.
So yeah.
So finals.
Oh, finals. Yeah.
Yeah. What is working for you with finals? I'm so interested to know what you do.
Oh man. I think I was trying to think of it and I was like, I don't really do anything with finals. Like finals are finals. But then I guess like one thing that I do, and I don't know if I like super deliberately thought about it, but I have a final exam that's not like super cumulative. So I think
Okay.
I describe it to the students as being the first part is a third midterm on all of the new material we do. And then there is this question that's sort of a sampler of all of the old things.
Okay.
But I think for me, I felt like, I think it's because I think that if I do a fully cumulative exam, I'm really diluting their focus maybe on the last bit of material that hasn't been
I
tested.
see.
I think the relevant piece of information is I don't have a third midterm right before finals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not totally sure that's the right thing to do, but it's been working. So
Yeah.
like I feel
Yeah.
like it's more weighted on the new material so that they really do need to kind of be
Mm-hmm.
tested on that and then there is like a sprinkling of stuff from the
Mm-hmm.
other stuff and I often make that stuff be the things that people mostly struggled with on the other midterms.
Mm-hmm.
And I do tell them, like, this stuff is going to come back and haunt you, possibly at the final. So it would be really good for you to kind of really engage with it and make sure you understand it.
How specifically do you get when you're telling them this is going to come back to haunt you? Are you like, on the final, there's going to be a problem about this category? Or are you like,
Yeah, I
what
think
happens?
that's a good question. And I don't say question 3 will be on there. But
Uh-huh.
after the midterms, we do discuss the tests, and there is this group test where they get a chance, like they all by the end of the like whole process should have a perfect version of the test. Do you know
Oh,
what I mean?
cool.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think I tell them in our discussions like a lot of people had problems with this question. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And I guess what I would hope is they go back, look at all the things they lost points for, and really engage with those and kind of
Mm-hmm.
make
Mm-hmm.
sure they get it.
I see. So you tell them these are the ones that a lot of people had trouble with,
Mm-hmm.
and you tell them things that people had trouble with are going to come up again.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so hopefully they can. It sounds like you're trying to get them to specifically go back and work at the things that they had trouble with in the past before the final, which is
Right.
cool. I like that.
Well, and it's like back to the whole thing I think we talked about 50 episodes ago or whatever it was, but about our exams, like ultimately, and sometimes I forget it, but like they are a learning tool to do exams. And so
Right.
I would hope that people would go back and be like, oh, how come I got that wrong? And what was that? And,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's cool. That really relates to what I'm working
Oh,
on, so
sweet.
that'll be
Okay,
fun when we
cool.
get there. But go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, I think some of this evolved from where I taught before here was a school that was on quarters.
Uh
And
huh.
time was so tight. Like it was very tight. So
Ah.
I definitely didn't feel like I could have a third midterm then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of just started it then and then kept going. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't
That
think
makes
there was a
sense.
big, I'm happy with it, but I don't think there was a huge decision to do it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's working, but you're not like committed to always doing it this way.
Right, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what about you?
what's working for me. So I really like the review days that I have before the final exam.
Oh, cool.
So like we have usually one day, but maybe this semester two, lecture days the week before finals that are just review. And it's usually fun, interactive, reminders of things that they don't know and should study. That's kind of my goal. And it always seems fun and interactive. So what I do is so I should say normally my final exam is multiple choice. And so the review is multiple choice. I don't think I'm going to do that this semester because I don't want to do multiple choice for a virtual test just because it's too easy to cheat on.
Yeah.
But so anyway, what I normally do is I have multiple choice questions. I just project them. They're the kind of question that maybe you just have to think about, or maybe you have to do short calculations, but we're not talking more than 3 minutes. They work on them. Then I say, okay, what letter is it? And, everybody calls out the letter, and then we say, okay, yes, it's B, and here's why, and we go through it, and we answer questions. And we do the next one, and it's everybody's chatting with each other and yelling out answers and saying, hold on, shouldn't it be A? Or, that kind of thing, and that's fun. And I think to do it in a not multiple choice way, it'll just be similar, except, short questions that are open answer or something like that. So anyway, I really like having the review days, and I think it's a good reminder often, oh my gosh, I forgot this was even part of this class. I need to go back and study that. Or whatever, it might be. And we do, of course, go over the material, and I do think it's fun. I think they have fun. It's always a loud day. So I like those.
It's sort of fun when you think about, like, and who knows how it is this semester, but I think definitely, but like in the beginning, if you did that, it would be total crickets. And
exactly.
Like, it's so nice on the last day. Like, I always remember in primary school, there would be like a party on the last day, and it kind of feels like that sometimes when you do a review, and it's good.
Totally. I really like the end of the semester where everybody's comfortable with the class, they're comfortable with each other, and it's loud. I feel like I can get a little more silly and crazy, and everybody's just like, wow, Claire's being weird, instead of being like, who is this professor? They're like laughing because I'm waving my arms around like a maniac,
It's like, so again, I'm like talking about primary school, but my friend is a primary school teacher in Ireland. And she said like the first half of the year is just so much work of, like, she describes it almost like being a bouncer in a nightclub, like just trying to get the kids able to line up. And like once you get that, it's just so wonderful, and you're kind of catching it in. And sometimes I can feel like that with the class when it goes well, where you're just like, oh, like we can all relax, and I'm not constantly on guard trying to prove whatever. And
they're not constantly on guard wondering how it's going to go down. We all can just be familiar with the system. And yeah, totally.
And then I think it's cool you do that too. And I have definitely done it in the past. I'm not confident I can do it this semester because I'm so behind. But it's really cool because, again, I always make reference to this thing and I don't know what it's called. But, the learning...
The Bloom's...
Taxonomy.
Thing.
That's it.
Yes.
I was like, the Blumenthal, or I don't know. Like, every time I say it, I make up a different word with what it's called. But isn't that whole, like, higher levels of learning... like weaving connections? And sometimes I have done that review and they're like, oh, like, was there actually a map? Like, this isn't all these independent topics.
There's a connection between chapter 13 and chapter 12. And you're like, yes, totally.
And sometimes I'm like, wow, I guess I really didn't convey that before now.
I'm glad you got it now, but I'm surprised you're only getting it now.
I wish that would have been clearer to you earlier, that this wasn't just like a scattershot. But yeah.
Totally.
That's cool though. One thing, I just unsolicited advice, if you want, you can do. I actually had a really successful session with using the polling.
Oh, that's a great idea. I should totally do that. Okay, tell me about it.
Well, so you don't have to, like, you could just make a poll question that's like Zoom. A, B, C, or D, and you just keep relaunching it, but you share your screen with the slides. And so they have, and then I don't know, maybe I'm just making this up and they're just polite, but I think they kind of were into seeing the graph of what everyone answered. And then sometimes I would give them a hint and then we'd redo it and see if it got better.
Oh, cool.
So I couldn't access that part where you're kind of discuss with your neighbor, but we could kind
Right.
of did a little bit of discussion and sometimes we would relaunch it. So that was
That sounds
cool.
cool. So you make one question in the poll,
Hmm.
answer A, B, C, D, but no question. And
Exactly.
then you share your screen that has all the questions.
Yeah.
That's
The, the
cool.
worst part is though, like my mouse is like super sensitive hair trigger, so I'm always showing the next slide, and they're like, and sometimes I'm like, okay, could someone who voted A who didn't see it when I did it, could you tell me why you did it? And they're like, because you showed us the answers.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I know. And then, yeah, if it's too easy an answer because they saw it, then nobody wants to say it.
yeah,
So, anyway, that's funny.
yeah. No, more not smooth behavior from me in the classroom, but or on Zoom. But yeah,
On
it was
Zoom.
cool. It actually went better than I thought it was gonna go.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking of Zoom mess ups, I don't know if I actually said on here, but one time in my class this semester, I was trying to leave the breakout rooms and I just ended the whole meeting. And so we're like
I
halfway
did
through
that
class
too.
and we're all kicked out.
For some reason too, I have an embedded tutor and I have to put her in a room. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put you in breakout room 9. And then I just do put myself in there every time. And she's left there. And I'm like, okay, I'm back. Sorry. So this time I'm going to try and.
Actually, I will put you this time. My bad. That's so funny.
Yeah. Zoom, I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
I don't want to hex myself, but my mortal dread is that I'm going to like go to the bathroom or something, like live on Zoom. And so, yeah.
Every time I come back into the room where I have the camera on, I'm like, is the camera on? And am I confident that I'm not actively in a Zoom meeting right now before I walk in?
I know.
And it hasn't happened yet, but I do have that thought too, walking down the hallway like, am I about to be on camera? No.
I
Okay,
know.
good, you know?
Yeah. Because you can imagine. I mean, it must happen, right? Like,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what are you working on?
Okay. Um, the thing I'm working on is the level of difficulty to do for
Okay,
finals. And
interesting.
I think, again, I'm like back in my day, but it was really difficult. They're different in Ireland. Like, we had this 2 week study period before
Oh,
tests, and you're really like kind of so immersed in things. It's like you're finally seeing the matrix, like you really get it at that point. And but then I just feel like these students are like kind of zombies at the moment and getting more and more tired.
right.
You know,
And then
so
they just
often,
run into finals. Yeah.
and I have this experience all the time of like stellar, amazing students who've aced everything, completely bombing finals, like
Okay.
spectacularly. And so, yeah, so I don't know. Like, so I think I struggle sometimes with the level of difficulty, and I think it should be harder because I think you're kind of
You're at the
hopefully
end
getting
of the class.
right,
Yeah.
and like you should be. So I don't know. That's what I struggle with, is kind of where to pitch that.
So, when you say you think it should be harder, do you mean harder than the other midterms or than the midterms were?
Yeah, I guess maybe, I don't know. Maybe that is what I mean. I think like
Mm-hmm.
it should be like really the first midterm should be easier, and then it should be
Hmm.
building up to this kind of like expertise.
That makes sense, but I worry about setting expectations. Oh, this midterm was easy, and then
Oh
they
yeah, and
walk
then
into the final.
the first midterm is never easy for them because like
Sure,
it's
okay.
new, and so I don't know. I just kind of struggle with like I also struggle with kind of workload at the end. I mean, we talked about that
Mm-hmm.
recently, and like I've always really wanted to do a final project, but right now I couldn't come up with a final project if my life depended on it. You know, like I'm so tired, so I'm pretty sure they couldn't do one at the moment because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously if you have a final project too, they would need to know about it a long time in advance, so it's not like I can spring it on them, but yeah, I definitely don't want to overwhelm people, including myself at the end.
Yeah. So another thought, so your midterms, your two midterms, you have a post midterm event where they
Mm,
go through the questions again, and so that's part of the learning experience, which you don't have, I presume, for the
no.
final. So
Hmm.
that makes it different too. Um, and I could see that that might impact how difficult you make it because the learning experience is all before and during the final as opposed to also after.
And I think what I'm saying is I think I end up making it a bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I want to know if that's okay. Like, I just want to, like, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yeah.
is it okay
Well,
to do that? Or,
one of the reasons that would be okay is because the learning experience is coming before and during the final exam,
mm-hmm.
as if like they're not going to have, if they didn't get it at the final, they're probably not going to think about it afterwards.
That's actually really interesting. Because it is like when I'm like, it's not a punishment. And then I'm like, oh, actually, the final kind of is. Because it's like, you can't rectify it afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, you
Uh-huh.
can't. That is
But
interesting.
by having a final, you are encouraging them to go back over the material,
Mm-hmm.
which is a learning experience.
Yeah.
Well, this also kind of relates to what I'm working on,
Okay,
which
tell
is
me, what are you working on?
targeting what they study, trying to encourage them to study particular things. So obviously, all of it is a good common answer for what's going to be on the final.
Sometimes, like, I think when I started teaching, I had not heard of a study guide. So
Uh-huh.
someone was like, and I do make one now, but they were like, "Are you gonna make a study guide?" And I was like, I did, like,
The whole
class,
class
like the
was a study
animal." So
guide.
it was like, yeah.
Totally, totally. So, yeah, so I do make a study guide. Um, But yeah, I generally say it's cumulative. And then we have these review sessions, which is supposed to remind them of things that they might have forgotten was part of the
Mm-hmm.
cumulative thing. Um, but I still feel like I'm not getting as much, or I'm not, as far as I can tell, I would like to get more of them going back and learning things that they had trouble with on the previous exams.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking about doing, but I haven't done before, is saying, like, there's going to be 6 exam questions. 3 of them are going to be these 3 topics. And these 3 topics, like a lot of people had trouble with polyprotic acids on exam 2, so there's going to be a polyprotic acid question on the final. So then, you know, if there's going to be a polyprotic acid question on the final, I'm sure that a much higher number of people are going to look back at polyprotic acids. So I think that could be a cool way. I'm not telling them these are the only topics you need to know, but I am saying you really do need to know these 3 topics. So then I can pick either topics that, the class as a whole didn't do as well on, or topics that are really the key topics to the class that, like, I really can't let you leave this class if you still
Yeah.
don't know how to do this thing. I'm not really sure exactly what I'll pick, but I'm kind of thinking of doing that. And then, there will be some questions as well. I'm not planning on telling them all of it. Because I do want them to read through their notes for the whole semester, but
I think
I
that's a
was
cool
hoping that would
idea.
target it. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a super cool idea. And it'd be
I'm
kind of
excited about
interesting from, like, even maybe a social point of view,
it. Uh-huh.
if you, like, looked at the impact of telling them that.
That would be a really good way to test it. So you do like I don't know, you do 1 year where you didn't tell them, and
Mm-hmm.
another year where you told them that a polyprotic acid question was going to be on the final, and you see how it compares. That'd be a really cool test.
Yeah, like, because I heard of someone doing a thing before where they basically gave the students the final beforehand
Uh-huh.
and said this is a practice test, and then it actually was the final, and
Uh-huh.
it didn't change their average at all. I was like, wow. I mean, like, I'm sure there's other ways of doing it that it would change it, but yeah, that could be kind of really interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, if your goal is this is a really important thing, I really want them to know it,
Right.
there's no harm in being like, this is a really important thing, I really want you to know it, so I'm going to put it on the
Totally.
test. And
Yeah, exactly. If the goal is for them to know it. So the only reason to not tell them what's on the exam, as far as I can tell, is because you want them to study more than you're going to put on the
but
exam.
don't you think that kind of really, you do that if you're saying, here's 3 things that are for sure, and
Yeah.
then everything else is fair game.
Mm-hmm.
And I
I
think it
think
would give
so.
people a good security blanket too.
Right. Like if you just really know those 3 topics down solidly, you've already got 50%, which is
Right.
cool. So, yeah, I'm going to try it. I'm excited. I think it's a good solution, which I thought of just because I can't do my normal. Well, I decide I don't want to do my normal multiple choice final. So then I was thinking, what am I going to do? And then anyway, this came to mind. So,
I think this is cool. I think it could be a cool project.
yeah.
Again,
Okay.
because I'm always feel really negative, but because of the way our like class sizes are, it's like a cool project. It'll only take you 500 years to get the number of data points you need. But anyway, like it could be just one of those ones that's like an interesting. Here's a
Yeah,
cool thing I did. Not like statistically, I've proven that this is always, you know.
right. It'll probably be an anecdotal thing of like, wow, these students who were pretty lost on this topic on exam two got it on the final. So that was helpful, hopefully.
Yeah, totally. I think
Yeah.
that's super cool.
Cool. Well, this was good. I'm glad we've thought about this
Yeah,
and
me
had
too.
this
And it's
chat.
always so funny because sometimes the things that I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna, like, I'm not gonna have much to say about this. I wonder what we'll do. And then you're like, oh, wow, it is actually really. I guess the purpose of the podcast is reflection, as I always forget sometimes. So that's perfect.
Totally.
Cool.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.